From time to time, the media reports that there is an ancient underground sea beneath Moscow which supplies the huge city with water. It is found 300 meters to 1 kilometer underground. Anomalous zones in the Moscow region, as well as sinkholes that have occurred and continue to occur in this area, are associated with it. This sea was discovered by academician Gubkin back in the 1930s. They were searching for oil and discovered an underground sea. He suggested that this body of water has remained since the Devonian period, when the entire territory of the central Russian plain was underwater. The lower layers of this body of water are salty, with a salt content like the Dead Sea. The middle layers are mineral, and above that is fresh water. We don't know if the Sarmatian Sea reached as far as Moscow. In Moscow, from one of the wells at a depth of 450 meters, right on the territory of the Ostankino beverage plant, they pump this kind of mineral water and bottle it under the brand name Moskovskaya. At the Mikoyan meat processing plant on Tololikina Street, they pump concentrated brine from a well for salt evaporation. There are also many sanatoriums in the Moscow region that have their own wells with salty water, in the Balneological Clinic on Tololikina Street, as well as in the suburban sanatoriums of Dorokovo, Monino, Podmoskovye, and Arkhangelskoye. How could this underground sea with varying degrees of salinity at different depths have formed? Here, geology lacks a definitive model. If there ever was a sea on the central Russian upland, then with the rapid accumulation of sedimentary rocks from volcanic eruptions, for example, it would have turned into at least a swamp or would have ceased to exist altogether. It's like the ancient capital of Mexico, Tenochtitlan, which is depicted as an island on a large lake on old maps, but now that lake doesn't exist and it didn't just dry up. The lake was filled with volcanic ash and covered by mud flows from underground. And this happened in historical times. A map of geological anomalies in the Moscow region will help explain the underground sea beneath Moscow. This map shows ring formations and tectonic uplifts. One of them, and a fairly young one, is central Moscow. They say that Moscow stands on 7 hills. Most likely these hills are mounds, uplifts. Ring-shaped faults are marked on the map. They could only have formed from the localized uplift of deep-seated fluidolites. The map also shows a ring-shaped arrangement of underground water, so most likely the underground fluidolites were not so much magmatic in origin, but cold, containing water. Another alternative explanation for these ring structures is that they are the result of gas masses rising to the surface containing a large volume of silanes. They were oxidized by oxygen from mineral and metal oxides. At the same time, a large volume of water and sand was formed, and the reduced metals created a place of origin. The sand with water came to the surface, a sand quarry in the Moscow region. A house explosion in Moscow is a strange case. On December 25, 1967, a 5-story building, number 77 on Osipenko Street, exploded. The commission found it was a gas explosion. Strangely, in 1932, a bakery exploded in the same spot, and in 1902, an apartment building there also collapsed into the ground. And of course, back then, neither of those buildings had gas lines. Here's another case. In 1956, a 5-story building collapsed on Koroshevskoye Highway, and in 1977, several buildings collapsed at once on Novokoroshevsky Drive. In 1987, a karst sinkhole with a diameter of 15 meters formed near building number 17 on Tukachevsky Street. The last serious roadbed collapse occurred in 1996 in the area of Quesenin Street. This may indicate that gas emissions in this area are continuing. Hydrogen degassing, by the way, creates cavities in limestone formations. Hydrogen is a reducing agent. When it combines with oxygen, as we know, hydrogen produces water, which dissolves limestone. Both silanes and hydrogen degassing of water may have formed the underground sea. According to Larin's theory, this geological anomaly of Moscow constantly makes itself known. In 50 years, about 50 building and ground collapses have been registered in Moscow. Recently, there was a collapse in Moscow City near a high-rise building under construction. Here is a ground collapse on Marshal Zhukov Avenue. There are also theories about collapses in Moscow. This is a branched network of tunnels that even diggers don't know about. Sinkholes form in abandoned voids, which affect ground subsidence on the surface. That's one possible theory. Ancient white stone Moscow was built like Rome. Just like in Rome, the building material, limestone blocks, was quarried right beneath the city. It was convenient. Buildings and underground shelters were built. Karst sinkholes occur in the limestone platform of Moscow's territory, pulling in the surface clay layers as well. The underground Moscow Sea is located in these limestones. By this logic, there should be many cavities in these limestone layers, and they were discovered as early as the middle of the century. This theory was proposed by Struve back in 1848. He suggested to Schweitzer to conduct research on this issue, and as a result of his studies, Schweitzer concluded that there are significant underground cavities in the Moscow area. This page is from The Movement of Continents and the Climates of the Earth's Past by B.L. Lekov, published in 1931. The cavities below Moscow were found using triangulation. Interestingly, this method can only detect large cavities that are gravitational anomalies. If there are large deposits of water in the limestone layers underground, such cavities can constantly form and expand over time. Here's another interesting question. Why did the ancient inhabitants choose such a geological anomaly as the site for founding a city? If we consider them ancient natives, maybe they chose the place because of the many springs with clean water coming out through the faults from the underground sea. The limestone outcrops also provided excellent material for building the future city. Well, if we consider the version that in the past this place was chosen for construction not by natives but by representatives of a civilization with a cosmic level of development, then there's no reason to doubt their choice or their methods of scanning the Earth's interior. And here's another interesting topic about an underground sea, but this time under Australia. Moreover, it's also hot. There is a theory that the high temperature of this sea is the reason for the formation of the desert on this continent. We know that most of Australia is a desert area. If there were water on the surface, there would be regular rainfall and vegetation. In Australia, only the north and east have a better climate and greenery. Inside the continent, there aren't even any permanent rivers along which agricultural activity would be possible. Only in the southeast are there the Darling and Murray rivers, whose levels depend heavily on rainfall. It turns out that in the northeastern part of the continent, there are actually huge reserves of underground water. There lies the so-called Great Artesian Basin of Australia. The underground water reserves here occupy 23% of Australia's area. That's almost 2 million square kilometers. The depth of the aquifers reaches up to 2 kilometers. The volume of water is estimated at 65,000 cubic kilometers, and the water temperature ranges from 30 to 100 degrees. And in many places there are geothermal springs. In addition to this underground basin, there are also smaller reserves of artesian water on the continent. Geology doesn't have a clear answer as to how such a huge underground source was formed. There's only a theory that Australia was once below sea level. Water gathered in lowland sandstones before the continent rose. But there's no reason given for the water heating. And what are these sedimentary layer deposits that are as much as 2 kilometers thick? The underground hot sea is thought to be supplied by water from the east, from the large watershed ridge. Where wells have been drilled, there is life. It is used for the farmer's household needs. The water steams because it comes out near 100 degrees. In 1915, more than 1,500 wells were drilled. Now there are already 3,000 of which are free-flowing. The first artesian well in the Great Artesian Basin was drilled in the 19th century in the Lake Eyre area. The waters surface as mineral springs. The underground sea's waters are weakly mineralized, high in fluoride and sulfur, and unsuitable for drinking or irrigation in most places. The freshest water is found at the edges of this sea. The highest water temperature is 110 degrees in the Spring-Laid Well in Queensland. There, a geothermal station has been built and it generates electricity. What else can be assumed about the origin of the huge underground reserve of hot water? There is a theory that water is constantly being formed in the Earth's interior. The layers of sandstone, which are aquifers, may indicate that this sand was not formed from the weathering of ancient mountains. The depth is still 2000 meters, and this suggests that the sand is the result of a different process of accumulation. As usual, that's from the oxidation of silanes, silicon hydrides, gases released during Earth's interior degassing. These gases are not found in the atmosphere because they are immediately oxidized by oxygen, forming water and silicon dioxide. That's quartz sand. This version seems more realistic than the idea of water accumulating in the lowlands millions of years ago. Such questions naturally arise. If the water on the surface in the Earth's crust appeared as a result of a chemical reaction of saline decomposition, then where did the salines themselves come from? Silanes? This is chemically bound hydrogen. When it is released, it reacts with oxygen, and as a result, we get sand and water. Where does Earth's deep hydrogen originate? The answer is still the same. Hydrogen, like other simplest substances, materializes from the ether. Then, as a result of numerous chemical thermonuclear reactions of cold nuclear fusion. Next comes the work of bacteria, and we get the same substances that we have on Earth. So, to the question of whether Muscovites will drink the underground Moscow Sea, the answer is simple: no, they won't. As long as water is being formed in the depths of the Earth, just like oil won't run out. As long as bacteria deep within the Earth keep processing the constantly forming hydrogen into more complex chemical chains. Hydrogen that hasn't formed chemical bonds is degassing all over the globe. This is exactly what Nikolai and Vladimir Larenz are proving. In past geological epochs, degassing could have been significant. More water was formed, and the pressure at lithospheric shifts and faults was relieved by water coming to the surface. Or there's another version. All of this happened as magmatic masses penetrated this basin, the water boiled, the pressure increased, and hot water poured out onto the surface of the continent. A basin temperature of 100 degrees shows this process exists as a residual phenomenon. The following observations explain this. At the southern end of the Great Artesian Basin are the drying Lake Eyre and a number of other lakes, Torrens and Gardner. Lake Eyre is the center of the Australian continent, featuring geological landscapes shaped by intense water erosion. To the north of this place, from above, you can see stripes that were apparently formed by streams of water. And they are very similar to the ribbon pine forests in the Barnaul area in Siberia, which indicates the direction of the most powerful mud flows coming from Kamchatka through all of Siberia towards Europe and Central Asia. These, as we believe, are traces of the flood of the century. In Australia, these drag marks are located along a different diagonal, and in the absence of vegetation, they are more visible than in Siberia. The specific cataclysm causing this direction needs investigation. Upon close examination of this area, it gives the impression that a lot of water once emerged from underground and flowed in powerful streams toward the ocean. Or, as in Siberia, it was transported by mud flows and a global flood. Older forests were washed away, disrupting the ecology. The water seeped underground, causing weathering, and its saltiness now prevents even grass from growing. Since then, the flora has never recovered in the central regions of the continent, and in all likelihood, this was no more than 300 years ago. We also considered the scenario where a 600-kilometer moon fragment landed between South America and Antarctica, creating the Drake Passage. And it was a wave that circled the Earth several times, first and foremost washing away Australia. Here is Mount Uluru, located in the continent's center, where there are no underground springs, but they could have been formed in the past by the outflow of mud masses. Here is another interesting place in Australia, located in the north of the Tanami Desert, the Wolf Creek Crater. The diameter of the crater is almost a kilometer and its depth is 60 meters. It is believed to be of meteorite origin. The crater was only discovered in 1947 from an airplane, but inside it there is a salt flat, which indicates that water once emerged there. Most likely, the crater was formed by a powerful explosion during degassing, and the silane fraction from the depths formed an underground reservoir. Of course, there are theories about the formation of water and its emergence that deserve thorough study, but in this way, they can only be studied at the level of practical geology. Samples must be taken and facts compared from field observations. Unfortunately, in geology, everyone is satisfied with the standard version. Science doesn't even study mud volcanoes. And if there are any questions in geology, they only concern predictions about the volume of mineral deposits.